Yes, factionalism was rearing its head. And because of lack of firmness, we were like drifting. No more drifting in Zanu PF. It has to be disciplined.
They have been denying it for a long time, but finally, they are no longer in denial. They have run out of denial bundles. Their denial balance is now 0.00 cents. For the first time since 2017, Zanu PF has officially admitted that there is a factionalism within its ranks.
Factionalism was rearing its head, and the decision we have taken is basically to nip it in the bud. Yes, factionalism was rearing its head.
Well, of course, people like Christopher Mutswangwa have previously talked about factionalism in passing, but this is the first time Zanu PF is actually saying it on record. It is also the first time since 2017 for Zanu PF to suspend and expel more than 10 people at the same time. And the main reason for those suspensions and expulsions is factionalism, the chief demon of Zimbabwean politics. Pamsoro vana papa. Ndaombera pamsoroi. Ndandine chikumbiro ka. I was thinking kuti, since muri musizini yema cup clash, komadi maita competition yekudzinga demoni re factionalism. Actually, I think there are 4 demons that Zimbabwean prophets should do a cup clash on. These are demonre factionalism, demonre corruption, demonre kusabatana, and of course, demonre kuzungaira neumbwende riri muma citizens. Shua nyika yeZimbabwe inganetsekana nemademoni aya. Isu tine maprofita akawanda kudarika vanhu. Anyway, Tavi, stop it. Focus. So I was saying that Zanu PF is suspending and expelling its members in a bid to stop factionalism. But here's the problem. I mean, it's good that they now openly admit to the existence of factions in their party. However, they are making 2 fatal mistakes. 1, they are only expelling members of one faction, and 2, the people who are being expelled are either foot soldiers or allies of the faction leader. You don't end factionalism in a party by firing low-ranking members and yet leaving their factional leader. Who poses a bigger threat? Is it the low-ranking members or is it their factional leader? Moreover, how do you cure factionalism by attempting to deal with only one faction and leaving the other faction to thrive? Because the people who have so far been either suspended or expelled are those known to belong to a faction opposed to ED. Zanu PF has effectively sown seeds of further division. Zanu at the moment yakangofanana nemunhu ane manyoka, metaphorically. So zvirikuita neZanu manji kusona magadziko uchida kuti manyoka asapoye. It won't work. Actually, you will not work. In fact, there is no work. Blessed Geza must be saying, you can expel me from Zanu PF, but you will never expel Zanu PF out of me. Fellow Sadza eaters, slay queens and bingers, socialites, papalites, snamalites, hatukujga rice, never snama rice. Welcome to the special report. So Zanu PF has expelled Blessed Geza on allegations of undermining the party and committing acts deemed to be treasonous against the state. As we all know, treason is a very serious crime. It attracts a life imprisonment. Actually, treason used to attract a death sentence. But thanks to the Death Penalty Abolition Act of December 2024, the death sentence no longer exists in Zimbabwe. I did a whole video about this in early January. A death penalty now only applies in a state of emergency. Anyway, the point was, the punishment for treason is life imprisonment. That is the predicament Blessed Geza finds himself in. But did he really do or say anything treasonous? And what is treason in the first place? What do we mean when we say treason? Well, let's go to section 20 of the Criminal Law Code. Subsection 1 says, any person who is a citizen of or ordinarily resident in Zimbabwe and who A. does any act, whether inside or outside Zimbabwe, with the intention of overthrowing the government, or B. incites, conspires with, or assists any other person to do any act, whether inside or outside Zimbabwe, with the intention of overthrowing the government, shall be guilty of treason and liable to be sentenced to death or life imprisonment. As I said, the death penalty was abolished, so only life imprisonment applies. But what the law is simply saying is, if you're a Zimbabwean citizen or a Zimbabwean resident and you try to overthrow the Zimbabwean government or assist anyone to overthrow the Zimbabwean government, you have committed treason. Whether you do this in Zimbabwe or outside, it's still a treason. But the key word is overthrow, because that's what you're being warned not to do. So, what is to overthrow a government, especially in this context? Well, to overthrow is to forcibly remove from power. Obviously, you need arms to forcibly remove a government. You use violence to forcibly remove a government from power. That is what it means to overthrow a government. Subsection 2 then says, without limiting subsection 1, the following may constitute acts of treason. A. Preparing or endeavoring to carry out by force any enterprise which usurps the executive power of the president or the state in any matter. B. In time of war or during a period of public emergency, doing anything which assists any other state to engage in hostile or belligerent action against Zimbabwe. C. Instigating any other state or foreign person to invade Zimbabwe. Now, has Blessed Geza violated any of the above mentioned provisions? Blessed Geza clearly called for peaceful demonstrations, and he expressly said, according to the provisions of the Constitution. Section 59 clearly says that every Zimbabwean has the right to demonstrate and to present petitions. But of course, those rights must be exercised peacefully. At no time does Geza incite violence. At no time at all. There is nothing wrong with citizens taking to the streets to call for the president to step down. That action is protected by the Constitution, provided that action is done peacefully. ED forgets that in 2017, the war vets aligned to him called for the people to get to the streets and call for Mugabe to step down. Geza is simply doing what Christopher Muchangwa did in 2017. What is good for the goose must be good for the gander. If they are saying that Geza is committing treason by calling for the people to demonstrate against ED, then they must also be ready to accept that Muchangwa committed treason when he called for people to demonstrate against Mugabe in 2017. But that is the nature of factionalism, you see. It makes people irrational. It's a silly season, or rather, it's a season dominated by silly people. It's what Robert Mugabe described as a moment of madness. Yes, Blessed Geza rattled and ruffled some feathers. Yes, he broke a protocol and shook Zanu PF to its core. Yes, his utterances propagated and escalated factionalism, but he most definitely did not commit treason. Unless if Zanu PF is another definition of treason which is not provided for by the Zimbabwean Constitution. But well, anything goes in this moment of madness. Political contestations are heightened, born out of Mnangagwa's unnecessary and unwarranted 2030 project. It's the 2030 nonsense which has brought all this mayhem in Zanu PF. If there is anyone to blame for the current chaos in Zanu PF, it's ED. His unbridled ambition for a dynasty has set his party on a suicidal path. ED has 3 years left on his term. 3 years. So there is therefore absolutely no need for these political contestations. You would think that there is a general election next week in Zimbabwe with the level of scheming and mudslinging we are witnessing. As usual, ED continues with his strategy of plausible deniability. He has the whole country confused, with many people not sure whether he wants a third term or not, because he's always indicating right but turning left. A plausible deniability. When you hear him speak, he sounds believable. After all, he has never at any time said that he wants a third term. He has consistently said that he will step down in 2028. So the political unskilled are saying, but if ED doesn't want a third term, why is he doing this? Why is he associating himself with a divisive slogan? Well, let me answer you, sirs and madams, comrades and friends, slay queens and bingers, socialites and papalites, varukujga rights, nevasnama rights. The answer is very simple. This whole 2030 thing is ED's brainchild. It's as simple as that. Him denying it is his usual strategy of plausible deniability. But of course, to some of us, his denial is not plausible at all. We see through his lies. I once did a parody of Eminem and Rihanna's song where I was saying to ED, I love the way you lie. Of course, the love there was sarcasm. It is unfortunate that not everyone can see through ED's lies. Level-headed Zanu PF supporters who don't necessarily belong to the Chiwenga faction actually don't want Mnangagwa to remain in office beyond 2028. But unfortunately, some of them, like this guy, Kudzai, just don't want to say the truth for reasons best known to them. They keep blaming the 2030s and exonerating ED when ED is the architect of this whole thing. Hansi, hey, stop abusing the president with your silly persuasions. Don't persuade the president, he doesn't want a third term. Hansi, hey, stop abusing ED. Just concentrate on doing government work. Stop abusing ED. And I'm like, really? Abusing ED? Really? Which ED are you talking about? Because it can't be Emerson Dambudzo. The ED you are talking about surely must be Egypt Zinemunenzwa, not Emerson Dambudzo. Abuse ED for... Are you for real? Come on, man. Get real. Not Madrid. In fact, passing Madrid. Pamberini Baka. Baka kusigandafa. Okay, focus stuff. Focus. Back to the subject. Zanu PF is suffering from factionalism and ED's response is to take painkillers. That approach is self-defeating. You don't cure a disease by taking painkillers because ma painkiller harape chirwere. A wise man once said, "Tsvaga chikonzero chaita musoro uteme, ugogadzirisa chikonzero chaita musana ubande." Shua, ungashingirira kutsvaga mhopo pamusana iwe une ziso rine mbonje. Tanga warapa kaziso kuti ugogona kuona mhopo yacho iri pamusana zvakanaka. Don't address the symptoms. Address the root cause. Pain is a symptom and painkillers simply interfere with the pain signals sent to your brain so that your body can perceive pain less intensely. Taking painkillers simply makes your body less receptive to pain. The problem is still there. What caused the pain hasn't gone. It's still there. However, you've just stopped your body from feeling the pain by taking painkillers. This is what Zanu PF is doing. It's dealing with the symptoms rather than dealing with the root cause. Expelling the foot soldiers who are making noise is like taking painkillers. It's like kusona magadziko uchida kuti tsvina isapoye. The foot soldiers who are making noise in WhatsApp groups are not the problem. The noise they are making is symptomatic of an underlying problem which requires a holistic approach, not this tip of the iceberg scraping that we are witnessing. Factionalism in Zanu PF begins at the top. As long as the top hasn't resolved its differences, then removing the low-hanging fruit won't work. If anything, they are pouring petrol into the fire because they have so far only targeted members of one faction. This is exactly the mistake Robert Mugabe made from 2016 to 2017. You see, in 2016-2017, Zanu PF only expelled members of the Lacoste faction. The G40 faction was left untouched. That is equivalent to promoting and condoning factionalism. That one is on Mugabe as the president. In fact, even in 2014, Mugabe did the same thing. He allowed and sanctioned the expulsion of Mujuru's Gamatox faction and left the Mnangagwa faction untouched. In fact, ED was even promoted to the position of VP when Mujuru and the faction got expelled. So Robert Mugabe, in his capacity as president in 2014, rewarded Mnangagwa for leading a faction and punished Mujuru for leading a rival faction. It didn't require a political scientist to see that this thing would not end well. And well, we all know how it ended, don't we? You can imagine the amount of regret Robert Mugabe felt in 2017. No wonder he didn't vote for Zanu PF in 2018. But isn't it interesting, if not strange, that all the founding members of Zanu were no longer members of Zanu by the time of their death? Wow. Just wow. But Robert Mugabe had no one but himself to blame. He condoned and rewarded factionalism in 2014 by promoting a leader of a faction to the position of vice president. He should have promoted someone not tainted by factionalism. Someone like maybe Sekeramayi, who he, by the way, actually had a soft spot for. Sekeramayi should have replaced Mujuru. Of course, this is not to say that Sekeramayi would have been a great VP or a better VP, but at least Mugabe would have set a precedent for not condoning and rewarding factionalism. So by promoting ED in 2014, Mugabe unknowingly ensured his future humiliation. You know, his undignified exit. It took only 3 years for that humiliation to come. And it's the current Zimbabwean president who inflicted that humiliation on Robert Mugabe. But for reasons best known to him, he has learned nothing from what happened to his late boss. Maybe it's because he is the one who removed him from power. Maybe it's that feeling of invincibility born out of a presidency ushered in by the use of force. I personally call it a cool syndrome. It makes a cool leader think he's cool. It gives him a false sense of security. After all, in 2023, he said, "If you plot against me, I get to find out." Well, let's find out what will happen in the coming days. Will ED and Chiwenga bury their differences for the sake of unity? And if so, what will happen to Blessed Geza? Will he resurface? From where? Will he bring his signal with him? Is the signal even his? Does he have the capacity to transmit that signal, given that the signal can only come at the behest of the military? Well, whatever happens, I'll be here to marinate you with all the details without fear or favor, because on this platform, we say it as it is. And as always, thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoy the content, please like and share.